mess when you're giving up 40-plus points a night and just hoping your goaltender can bail you out. Look, Lundqvist has been bailing this team out his entire career, so I don't know if that's the coaches are just saying, well, that's the way it works. We have Lundqvist in goal, and now Georgiev is playing just as well as Lundqvist, so let's keep it up. But that's just not a way to win in this league ultimately. Especially if they can get to the playoffs. I mean, where everything sort of tightens up, and the scoring is down tremendously. If you're still giving up those odd man rushes or 40-plus shots a night, you're going to get swept right out of the playoffs. So defensively, I don't know what they're going to have to do, whether it's move on from, Lindy Ruff, who was ever running the defense, or, Quinn has to look himself in the mirror. We talk about players looking themselves in the mirror. He does and say, look, this is just not working defensively. But nothing has changed. Even during this winning streak, like you mentioned, I mean, it's right out there on the stat sheet. They're still giving up 40-plus points and 40-plus shots a night. It's just that the goaltending's been better.
Yeah, no, and Georgie and Hank have kind of pretty much evened out here. I mean, Georgie's played 18 games, and Hank's got 22, and Georgie's at 10-7-1, and Hank's at 9-8-3. The goaltending situation here is obviously not a problem. I think, as far as the direction of the team, and I think that's what we're all sitting back here and we've talked about, as far as the system and these are all it's the three major entities that of this machine that we're trying to kind of all watch together here. And like I've said this too, I said there's two guys that are up close in front about this, and that's JD and Gorton, and they're watching all aspects of this. So we've raved about the offensive productivity here these last couple of games. They've got through it with their defensive lapses, and we've got really skilled offensive defensemen here. We've got a stud there and Jacob Trouba as well. And, the goaltending there is kind of, there's been a discussion all year and talking about, potential trades down the road in terms of where they're going to go. So, I was just kind of thinking what you were talking there about them. I mean, could you imagine, you get to some point there in the spring and, something's got to give here, obviously, as far as gameplay and consistency. I'm talking about whether Hank goes 2 games, Georgiev goes 3 games, or whatever. I think that works with other teams as far as who's in your lineup or whatever. Whether it's what Boston has up there. But Tuukka Rask is their number one guy, obviously. Hank, is he our number one guy still? Maybe just because of his legacy, yes, he is. But as far as where he is on the team right now, is he really the number one, or are they both number one here? And when does the coach Q here have to make this decision where he's got to try and run one of these guys 5 or 6 in a row, and decide what they're going to do? And the other thing I was thinking about, when we were talking about Kreider, could you imagine some kind of really good, strong, major package deal if you put Kreider and Georgiev in a package deal or something? What you could maybe possibly do there? I don't know if that really kind of works out, financially, statistically, or contractually. I don't know what that is. I'm just kind of thinking out loud here. And if Shesty still plays well, and you go in that direction, because I think for the first time here, especially watching these last 5 games and seeing where the team is kind of hanging around competitively, going into January now, and the team is going to have to make a decision as far as, are we going to go for the playoffs here? And if we go for the playoffs, you're obviously going to try and win. So this is going to be, I know we talk about good problem to have, but it's something to really kind of start maybe just looking at now. And for me, we've joked about it, but I think now you kind of really have to start looking at one of these guys is going to have to get the team has to get serious, KD, is what I'm getting at. They've got to run one of these guys, and they've, for a few games in a row, more than 3, go to 5 or 6, and the team's got to put up a 6-7 game winning streak. I mean, that's going to kind of give JD and Gorton a lot to look at, and for us too. It's almost like if you're in a rebuild here, let's stop this wishy-washy stuff back and forth. Obviously the defensive aspect is a problem of it, but as a team here, how can they make that decision? Let's go with Hank for 6 games. Let's go with Georgiev for 6 games. Let's see what happens. And let's run these same lines for 6 games, and let's just kind of go for it. And let's see if we can sit back and go, after 10 games, hey, we won 6 or 7 in a row. Is this team the way it's made up right now, with all the components, the new guys, Trouba, Panarin, Stromer, the defensive, Capocacco, all the stuff that we've got going on here, where they're going to, make a big move, shift, cause the ground to shake or whatever, or we just get into this thing that we're going to talk on every show. Maybe this guy should get traded. Maybe this guy should go up or whatever. I guess it's me asking for the team to kind of maybe just decide whether or not they're going to go for it here. Not on a big stage in terms of, major trades all here and there. But those two things, KD, the goaltending aspect of it, maybe lining up with Strome and Kreider at some point there in the spring, and obviously seeing if this team can go on a run here.
Yeah, I thought that Quinn was ready to sort of give the reins over to Georgiev after the West Coast trip. I think he outplayed Lundqvist during that trip. Lundqvist had that tough game in Anaheim. And then, he went with Georgiev when they came back against Nashville, and Georgiev had a bit of a stinker. But Quinn went right back to Georgiev again. And in the past, he probably would have went with Lundqvist. And he went with him the next game, that home game against Toronto you mentioned before, and Georgiev put up another stinker. So he had 2 in a row where he had given up, 5 goals against Nashville and then 6 goals against Toronto. And I think Quinn may have been like, oof. Maybe he's not ready for this.
Yep.
And he went back with Lundqvist against Anaheim. Actually, went back with Lundqvist for 3 games in a row. He did Anaheim, Philly, and Carolina.
Yep.
Then obviously you had the back-to-back, so he went back with Georgiev. So, I thought at that point he was ready to ride Georgiev, and he sort of didn't take advantage of his opportunity there. And Lundqvist came back, and Lundqvist has actually played pretty well now that, he played 3 of the last 4 games now. I think he's been good. And yeah, Quinn is in a difficult situation regarding the goaltender. He has the legacy of Lundqvist, who is still playing very well. And you have this young guy in Georgiev who, could potentially be the heir apparent if, Shesterkin maybe falters a bit, and you still want to see what you can get from Georgiev in a 10-game span, like you had mentioned. And so it's a difficult spot for Quinn. What do you do with, an all-time great Ranger player, while we figure out what this team can be in a rebuild and what one of our young goalies could potentially do with a larger workload? It's a tough spot. Because they're in a rebuild, I would defer to Georgiev, and I would be playing him a lot more than Lundqvist, even if they're looking to get into the playoffs. This year is never about getting in the playoffs. It would be nice.
And that's the catch, KD, though.
Yeah.
But if you do ride Georgiev for a little bit there, and Hank gets stale, and say, they do make the playoffs, just as Hank, you got to keep Hank loose.
Yeah, I do, but I think the development of Georgiev is more important than potentially getting in getting Lundqvist in there to stay loose or to potentially help him get in the playoffs. We need to know what we have in this kid. If we are going to be hanging around that sort of playoff spot, we're 6 or 7 points out now, and just say, let's ride this kid. Let's see what he could do. In a bit of a pressure situation where we need to win games to get, into the playoffs, and let's see how he handles it. Because if he can't, then you got to look to maybe move on from. You have to ultimately see what you have in him. So, going with Lundqvist and leaving Georgiev on the bench, I don't know how that helps us long term in the rebuild. Short term, yeah, get us in the playoffs and it'd be good to get the young guys some playoff spots. But, the goaltending position is such a big piece of this, and they have the 3-headed monster, and they got ultimately, like you said, start sort of making a big decision here and see what we have in these young goaltenders.
Yeah, and I think January might be we got 11 games in January, right? And we've got some tough teams that we're going to be playing. Calgary's playing really well. We got Colorado on the schedule. The Devils are a desperate team. They should pretty much take care of them. They've got St. Louis. We've got 3 games against the Islanders. And you got to give credit to where credit's due. The Isles are playing very, very well. They're just not a team that, you got to work hard to beat the Islanders. And when they lose, it seems it's only when they beat themselves. Columbus is on the schedule, and then there's 2 against Detroit at the end. So, 11 games on the schedule here because, when you get to February, which has another bucket load of games in that month too, and now you're getting closer to trade deadline, you're getting closer to deciding whether or not, or finding out where you are after January, whether you're still in that pack to catch a wild card spot and make the playoffs, and that's when the organization's going to make this kind of, if it's a financial thing, the Rangers don't need to make the playoffs for the financial aspect of it in terms of an extra 4 games or whatever the heck it is, or extra 2 games. Let's say if they were to get into the first round and get knocked out, it's not really. That's not really an issue. And as far as a pride thing as an organization, I mean, me and you, I don't know. If they don't make the playoffs this year, but they come out at the end of it where they've kind of got a game plan and we can kind of see a future, and that's what the rebuild's all about, I'm okay if the Rangers don't make the playoffs this year. So, depending on where the organization feels, how important it is for them to make the playoffs. And they have said this. I mean, Quinn said it, and they all want to make the playoffs. I think every team does. But, as far as what we're talking about here, and finding out what the makeup of this current team has in terms of helping them make those tough decisions that we're also talking about, whether it's goaltending, whether it's Strome, whether it's Kreider, and whether it's a certain couple of prospects that we got to move up, move down, or move on from. I think next month is probably that one of, what's that saying? On the pot or get off of it. I don't.
There you go.
We're a family show here, but so. I think maybe next month, why not, hopefully, and this, Lindy Ruff, the defensive stuff, maybe they just kind of just unload here next month and kind of go for it and see where they come out of it on the other end.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, these next 2 months are definitely crucial to where the rebuild is going. When you get to the trade deadline, there is going to be movement. I mean, the Rangers aren't not going to make a move. And most likely it's going to be a sell move. I can't see them buying unless it's like a real minor move to make. But as far as bringing someone on board to help the team, but I think you're going to see some players traded away. It's just a matter of, are the younger guys that we have going to be ready to step up? I mean, if they are able to trade a Chris Kreider, you assume Kratsov is back, is going to be heading up. And he's going to be ready to go. So, yeah, the organization the next 2 months are going to be huge as far as, where do they see themselves? Where do they see some of these players fitting in, some of the prospects fitting in? And where do we go from there? Because if the team does go into a tailspin, and like you mentioned, there's some difficult games on the schedule in the next 2 months. If they do go into the tailspin, they're just like, well, we need to see what we can get from Kreider, continue to build the system from there, or, we're looking pretty good here. We're actually in a playoff spot now. So now what? Do we continue with what we want to do with the rebuild and still trade a Kreider, or, hey, let's see how far this team can go and somehow, some way stand pat. I still don't see that happening, but yeah, the next 2 months will be real interesting. I think that the things that concerned a lot of Ranger fans, not us, as far as where players are in the lineup and who is up and who is down, are really going to be minor compared to the decisions and thought processes that are happening in the next 2 months. I think you're going to see decisions on which direction this rebuild goes be made in the next 2 months. So, not like, well, Brendan Smith was on the fourth line. I mean, that's going to be small potatoes, I think, compared to what they're going to be looking at in the next 2 months.
Yeah, man, grab your popcorn. I think it's going to be a big month for JD and Gorton, too, as far as, them making some decisions here and that trickling down to Coach Quinn and Lindy Ruff. I think, after 30, 40 games here, definitely obviously beyond 30 games here, but getting into that 40, 50 game evaluation period as an organization, and they'll know everybody on this bench, personality-wise and everything else. They'll have a good idea of what's going on down in Hartford. And then you'll also start the vibes will start happening out there as far as other GMs and other teams in terms of the direction they're going. There's going to be other teams that are going to be unloading some personnel as well too.